I found out far too early that running from a spiritual beast was the easy part. The hard part came afterward, when you had to walk back into the village looking like a normal person, hide a spiritual resource, clean blood off your arm, and, if possible, stop two emotionally unregulated children from blurting something out to the first person who asked why all three of you looked like you had just negotiated with death. In short, cultivation was starting to become genuinely inconvenient. I stared at the Spiritual Dew Fragment for a few more seconds. The bluish light pulsed slowly in my palm, cold and delicate, as if it were breathing. It was small, pretty, harmless at first glance. Exactly the sort of thing that ruined lives. Mu Xiaoyan was the first to break the silence. Put that away. I looked at her. Your suggestion is late, but I appreciate the effort. I'm serious, and I'm agreeing with you. The boy stepped a little closer, still out of breath, but now wearing that dangerously familiar expression of curiosity beginning to reclaim ground from survival instinct. What is that? A problem, I answered. A treasure, he pressed. A glowing problem. That still sounds like a treasure. In functional worlds, those are usually the same category. He frowned, clearly understanding none of it, which struck me as a temporary act of divine protection. Mu Xiaoyan was still staring at the scratches on my arm with the tense indignation of someone who wanted to pick a fight, but was still too busy making sure I wasn't about to collapse dead in the next 2 minutes. Honestly, I found it touching, on a strictly moderate level. I closed my hand around the fragment and felt the cold energy pulse against my skin. Almost immediately, the system appeared. Suggestion: do not maintain prolonged direct contact with the resource without adequate preparation. Great. Useful information. Finally, is there anywhere in the village nobody goes near? I asked quietly. They both looked at me. What? The boy said. I'm asking a relatively simple question. Why are you acting like you're 50? Because someone here needs to compensate for the widespread absence of prudence. Mu Xiaoyan pointed at my closed hand. You want to hide that? Congratulations. Your eyesight remains functional. You don't have to answer everything like that. Yes, I do. It's tradition now. She stared at me for a moment, then sighed in that very specific way people do when they've decided arguing with me right now would take more effort than it was worth. Good decision. Promising. There's a spot behind our house, she said. A corner near some big rocks and old roots. Hardly anyone goes there. The boy objected immediately. Hey, why are we hiding it near your house? Because near yours there are chickens, your siblings, your neighbors, and probably half the village. That is a very specific criticism. That's because I know you. It was a strong argument. I meanwhile had already moved on to a different line of thought. Hiding it too close to any house had risks, but hiding it far away would mean leaving the village again with a spiritual resource in hand and a scratched arm. My room for elegant decisions was shrinking rapidly. The system flickered. Observation: the fragment may be temporarily contained in a dry wooden container or thick cloth, with slight loss of efficiency over time. Perfection. Almost. I looked at the two of them. All right, here's what we do. We walk back normally. Nobody runs. Nobody panics. Nobody says anything about spiritual beasts, mysterious glowing objects, near-death experiences, or any other recent terrible decisions. The boy raised his hand like a particularly unqualified disciple. And if someone asks why you're bleeding? I looked at my arm. I say I fell. Mu Xiaoyan's eyes widened. You didn't fall. Of course I didn't. But it's a socially acceptable lie. That doesn't sound convincing. You clearly underestimate me. She almost argued, then gave up, which I counted as a partial victory for civilization. We started back. Slowly. In silence at first, then in the kind of silence filled with short breathing, crushed leaves, and too many thoughts for people our age. The village gradually came into view ahead, with its crooked fences, smoke rising from cook fires, and that irritating sense of normalcy the world likes to maintain even after discreetly trying to kill you 300 steps away. It was offensive but comforting. That was the problem with almost dying. Everything looked strangely beautiful afterward. The curve of a rooftop, the sound of someone calling chickens, the smell of firewood. the extraordinary fact that I was still breathing. Back on Earth, I would have valued all of that sooner if I had known what it would feel like to claw it back with my own hands. Mu Xiaoyan walked beside me, quieter than usual. The boy was on my other side, kicking little stones without much conviction, which for him was practically a state of mourning. When we reached the first houses, I straightened my posture and hid my closed hand inside the wide sleeve of my robe as best I could. It wasn't perfect, but it helped. I kept my scratched arm slightly behind my body. Improvise, adapt, survive. Apparently, I was already living by that philosophy. An older woman walking by with a bucket looked at us and frowned. "You three are too quiet. Terrible start." The boy opened his mouth. I anticipated disaster and answered first. "We're tired." She nodded, as if that explained the unnatural behavior of 3 children suddenly making less noise. Good. Tired children talk less. I almost felt like asking her to repeat that to half the village. We kept walking until we reached Mu Xiaoyan's house, which stood a little past ours, in an area where the ground sloped gently upward and the fences were even more improvised than average. Behind it there was, in fact, a more hidden corner. Large rocks, thick roots pushing out of the ground, and a patch of shade where bushes grew at odd angles. Discreet enough. Maybe. I looked around. No one. "All right," I said. "You two keep watch." The boy frowned. "Do we look like guards?" "No. You look exactly like the kind of people I'd station outside to reduce damage." That was an insult. That was strategy. Mu Xiaoyan crossed her arms. "Just do it." I knelt by the roots and slowly opened my hand. The fragment's bluish light looked stronger in the shade. I pulled a thick piece of cloth from inside my clothes. Simple, clean enough, and carefully wrapped it around the fragment. The instant the fabric touched the glowing surface, the pulsing dimmed slightly. It was still active, just less eye-catching. Good. Then I found a spot between 2 thick roots and dug with my fingers and a flat stone until I had opened up a small, firm space in the damp earth. Nothing elegant, but functional. I buried the wrapped fragment, covered it with dirt and dry leaves, and repositioned the stone on top. Then I pulled my hands back and studied it. Visually, there was nothing special there. Excellent. Now all that was left was the easy part. Trusting that nobody would step exactly on it, dig there out of curiosity, or be guided by fate with the irritating precision it usually reserved for ruining discreet plans. The system appeared. Improvised hiding spot. Acceptable. Probability of accidental discovery by an ordinary adult. Low. Probability of discovery through narratively inconvenient events. Impossible to calculate. Very reassuring, I muttered. Mu Xiaoyan glanced over her shoulder. "What did you say?" "That it looks good." She stepped a little closer, studying the ground as if she might be able to see through the dirt. "Is it really going to be safe there?" Safe is a strong word, but it's better hidden than it was in my hand. The boy came closer too. "Can we come back later and look at it?" "No. Not even from far away?" "No. Not Ev." You really do enjoy repeating questions when you already know the answer. He huffed. Mu Xiaoyan looked at me sideways. "When are you going to get it back?" Good question. The problem was that I still didn't know what to do with it besides hide it. It was a real spiritual resource. The system had given me the reward for obtaining it, but not full instructions for immediate use, which probably meant that absorbing or refining it without preparation could be educational in a lethal sense. "When I'm sure I won't explode," I answered. They both stared at me. "Was that a joke?" the boy asked. "Half of one." He did not like the correct half. We all stood up at almost the same time when we heard voices coming from the front of the house. Instinctively, I wiped my hands on my clothes. Mu Xiaoyan adjusted her braids. The boy, meanwhile, did nothing useful, which at least maintained consistency of character. A woman called from inside. "Xiaoyan, are you there?" She straightened. "I'm here." Then she turned back to me, still in a low voice. "Your arm." I looked down. Right. The marks were still there, thin, but visible. Nothing dramatic. Dramatic enough for a mother, though. And my mother, I had already noticed, possessed an advanced sense for problems trying to pretend they were normal. I needed a bad explanation immediately. Scratched by a branch, I said. The boy's eyes widened. That doesn't look. I stepped on his foot. Not hard enough to injure. Hard enough to educate. It does, I finished, looking directly at him. Mu Xiaoyan understood first. Her eyes narrowed. You're going to lie. I'm going to preserve domestic peace. That's still lying. You have a very inconvenient moral compass for someone who dragged me to a glowing thing in a creek. She flushed a little with anger and opened her mouth to retort. But her mother's voice came again, closer this time. Xiaoyan. Coming. She looked at me one last time. There was scolding in it, and worry, and that slightly shaky energy of someone who still hadn't decided whether she wanted to slap me or thank me for not letting anyone die. An interesting combination. Don't do anything stupid by yourself, she murmured. The sentence was so sincerely offensive that I almost smiled. Today, I replied, unlikely. I think I've already hit my quota. The boy let out a short laugh, far too nervous to be truly funny. Mu Xiaoyan gave both of us an exasperated look, then ran to the front of the house. I was alone with the boy for a few seconds. He watched me with that cautious curiosity people develop after they realize you know something they don't. I didn't like that at all. Reputation worked like that. It grew first in all the wrong details. Are you going to tell anyone? I asked. He looked sincerely offended. I'm not an idiot. I waited. He looked away. Okay, he admitted. Not like that. That was not reassuring. I just mean. He scratched the back of his neck. What was that, really? I thought for a moment. I couldn't say system. I couldn't say potentially valuable spiritual resource I almost died getting. I couldn't even confirm too much without feeding exactly the kind of curiosity that produced fatal second attempts. So I chose a partial version of the truth. Something connected to the mountain. He swallowed. And the beast. That too. You knew what to do. I knew what could go wrong. Sometimes that's enough. He went silent for a moment, looking at me with an uncomfortable mix of admiration and confusion. There it was, the beginning of the problem. People always start by admiring what you personally considered a miserable sequence of desperate improvisations. Don't look at me like that, I said. Like what? Like I'm interesting. But you are. My first impulse was to deny it. The second was to realize denying it would only make him insist. So I chose the third option, which was the most mature one available to a secretly exhausted child. Go home. He laughed. You're really bossy. It works more often than it should. True. Still smiling a little, he headed off down the path, kicking a stone with less energy than usual, but visibly intact. Which, all things considered, was a good statistic for the day. I waited until he disappeared between the fences before I started walking toward my house. Every step now came with the delayed weight of what had happened. My arm stung a little. My legs were tired. My heart still seemed to have forgotten how to return to a socially acceptable rhythm. But beneath all that, there was something else. Satisfaction. The word irritated me because it sounded far too triumphant for someone who had nearly been bitten by a bad-tempered spiritual weasel. Even so, it was true. I had faced a real problem. I had protected the two of them. I had taken the fragment. I had gained 2 years. 66. In my head, the number was still glowing. 66. For the first time since waking up in this world, I began to understand something dangerous. Living a long time would not depend on caution alone. Caution was the foundation, essential, sacred. But sometimes, in order to protect what mattered and tear time away from fate, I would have to act. Not like an idiot, not like a martyr, but like someone who knew exactly when to retreat and when 2 years of life were worth a bad morning. When I stepped into the house, my mother saw me before I could rearrange my expression. Her eyes fell directly to my arm. Wonderful. Shunner, she said, dropping the cloth she was holding. What happened? I looked at the scratch, then at her. Simple lies. Quick ones. Natural ones. I was ready, or thought I was. because at that exact moment, before I could even open my mouth, the system appeared with a new line. Secondary mission unlocked. I almost closed my eyes in pure disgust. Of course it had. My mother took a worried step toward me. Shen, forcing my face to keep some appearance of normality, I raised my eyes to hers while the new message glowed at the edge of my vision. And judging by the system's expression, I already knew my piece had just gotten more expensive. There are moments in life when the universe looks at you, measures your exhaustion, notices your scratched arm, your spiritual resource illegally buried in someone else's backyard, and thinks, now is the perfect time to make everything worse. That was exactly the energy of the system's new message. My mother was already walking toward me, clearly focused on my arm, while in the corner of my vision the spiritual interface floated there with the offensively calm serenity of something that had never once needed to improvise excuses in front of a worried woman. Secondary mission unlocked. I kept my face as neutral as possible, which required considerable moral effort. Shenner? My mother repeated, now standing right in front of me. What happened to your arm? I looked at her, then at the scratch, then back at her. Simple lies. Natural. Plausible. A branch, I answered. She narrowed her eyes. Every mother is born with the ability to detect two things: fever and fraud. A branch? She repeated. I tripped near the path. Technically, at some point that day, I really had come very close to tripping near a path. The lie was simply making creative use of peripheral facts. My mother took my wrist gently and pulled my arm closer to examine it. Her eyes grew more tense. That doesn't look like an ordinary scratch. It was an ambitious branch. She gave me a look. I tried to seem like an honest child being unfairly accused. Unfortunately, I had the feeling my talent for sarcasm and my talent for innocence did not coexist well on the same face. While she pulled me inside the house, the system interface expanded slightly. Objective: properly treat the injuries, conceal the existence of the spiritual dew fragment, and begin the first stage of basic body refinement. I nearly stopped mid-step. My mother noticed. Does it hurt? No. A little. The system continued, relentless. Time limit: 24 hours. Reward: plus 1 year of life expectancy. Gentle body refinement manual. Failure: loss of the best initial integration window with the current body. Additional comment: surviving danger only to die from post-event incompetence would be embarrassing. I almost admired its thematic consistency. Almost. My mother sat me down on a low stool near the table, went to fetch water and a clean cloth, and I sat there trying to process several layers of disaster at once. First, I had 24 hours to deal with my arm, the fragment, and also start some kind of body refinement. Second, the system already knew about the buried fragment, which made sense but still bothered me. I like to keep my secrets as though even the interface attached to my soul ought to earn them. Third, 1 more year. 67 if I got this right. I didn't want to be this kind of person. I truly didn't. But all the system had to do was put plus 1 year in front of any task, and suddenly I became an extremely committed citizen of productivity, discipline, and personal growth. That seemed manipulable and irritatingly effective. My mother came back with a basin, a cloth, and an expression that made it very clear that if I was hiding something, domestic peace was going to end before the warm water cooled. Let me see properly. I held out my arm. She cleaned the wound with the firm care of someone who had spent far too many years tending physical fragility in her own home. That touched something in me I preferred to keep quiet. There was something cruel about realizing that even in this new life, her hands still knew the shape of worry. You shouldn't have been running around so soon, she murmured. I wasn't running around. She raised an eyebrow. I was moving in an energetically misguided manner. She didn't smile, but I could tell there was a battle going on inside her. Part of her wanted to keep scolding me. The other part was far too busy thanking the heavens that I was here, whole, instead of lying down sick again. Shunner, she said more softly. You really are better, aren't you? The question carried more weight than it seemed to. It wasn't about my arm. It was about everything. About me standing up. About me eating. About the color in my face. About the fact that, for the first time, I looked like a living child instead of a candle trying to last until the end of the night. I looked at her and answered without irony. I am. She fell silent for a moment as she finished cleaning the scratches. Then she nodded very slightly. Good. That was all. But I understood. After putting a bit of herbal paste on the wound and wrapping a simple bandage around my arm, she told me to stay still, not go outside, not get any ideas, and rest. I gave all the standard answers children give when they know they are not going to be obedient, but intend to sound respectful in the short term. As soon as she stepped away to tend the fire, I lifted my eyes to the window and took a deep breath. Right. I needed to think. The mission had 3 parts. Treat the wound, resolved at least superficially. Hide the fragment. Partially resolved, but hide in a world that enjoyed creating dangerous coincidences was not a stable condition. Begin basic body refinement. Still entirely vague. Explain? I murmured, almost under my breath. The interface appeared. The host's current body possesses an excellent natural foundation, but remains in a raw state. The first stage of basic body refinement consists of using qi to strengthen the initial channels, flesh, breathing, and structural adaptation. That was very beautiful and very impractical. Simpler summary: the host needs to stop passively existing inside a good body and start using it properly. You have a rare gift for insulting people efficiently. Thank you. I ignored the urge to throw a spoon at it, partly because there was no floating spoon available for aggression against abstract entities. And the fragment? The Spiritual Dew Fragment may be used to assist qi absorption, lightly purify the body, and improve the initial refinement if handled with caution. What does handled with caution mean? Controlled contact, isolated environment, minimal exposure, no witnesses, no idiocy. That last requirement always feels directed at me. Based on recent history. Fair. I sat there thinking while listening to the sounds of the house, the fire, my mother's footsteps, the whole world stubbornly remaining simple while I managed spiritual dangers in the gap between soup and maternal scolding. I would have to retrieve the fragment after dark, when nobody could see me. I would have to find a place where I could use it without being interrupted. And I would have to do it without causing any absurd phenomenon that might draw the village's attention or, worse, the mountains. In the end, I decided 2 things. First, the place had to be nearby. Going far outside the village again on the same day was an invitation for fate to laugh in my face. Second, I would need an excuse before I actually needed one. Unfortunately, fate decided to act first. There was a light knock at the door. My mother opened it. I recognized the voice that came next immediately. Mu Xiaoyan. Auntie, is Shin here? I closed my eyes for a second. Naturally. My mother looked at me from across the room. There was far too much curiosity in her expression for my taste. He is. Mu Xiaoyan walked in with the energy of someone who had tried to look normal the entire way here and failed a few steps from the door. She stopped the moment she saw me sitting there with my arm bandaged. Her eyes went straight to the bandage, then to me, then back to the bandage. So you really did get hurt, she said. My mother turned her head very slowly. Ah, excellent. Very elegant, Xiaoyan. A subtle performance. Almost poetic. She realized her mistake a moment too late. I mean, I saw him earlier and I thought maybe, because he looked kind of. She began with all the smoothness of someone digging her own grave with a spoon. My mother looked at me. I looked at Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan looked at nowhere in particular with the spiritual focus of someone abandoning her own body. I felt sorry for her. A little. I tripped, I said. On a branch, Mu Xiaoyan added far too quickly. My mother crossed her arms. Silence. The kind of silence where adults let children drown by themselves, because helping now would only delay the truth. I see, my mother said. No, she didn't. She had filed it away, which was worse. Mu Xiaoyan, realizing she was compromised anyway, stepped closer to me and lowered her voice a little. Does it hurt a lot? Less than your dramatic entrance. She ignored that. I brought this. Only then did I notice the small cloth bundle in her hands. Simple, discreet, much more useful than her ability to lie. She handed it to me. Inside was a jar of herbal ointment with a fresh, strong smell. "My mother made it," she said a little more quietly. "It's better than the regular kind." I looked at the bundle, then at her. "You came to bring me medicine and almost exposed us in the process." "I know. Bold of you to admit it." "Shut up." My mother made a short sound that was very close to a trapped laugh. Dangerous. If the two of them started talking about my arm in front of each other, I would have a maximum of 3 minutes before losing control of the narrative. "Thank you," I said more seriously. Mu Xiaoyan looked surprised for half a second. Then she looked away. It was nothing. That was a lie. It had been something. She had come here because she was worried. And, to make the situation statistically more inconvenient, I found that pleasant. The system appeared. Observation. The host is accumulating human relationships at an imprudent speed. I do not need commentary on that, I thought. Recorded and ignored. Mu Xiaoyan stayed a few moments longer, saying little and looking far too suspiciously at me and my arm. My mother, meanwhile, observed the whole scene with the unsettling calm of someone who had already noticed more than she should have and decided to wait. In the end, Xiaoyan left under the transparent pretense that she had just come to drop off the ointment, which my mother accepted with the kind of expression that clearly meant yes, of course, and I'm a spiritual beast. As soon as the door closed, I slowly raised my eyes. My mother was looking at me. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." That was the most threatening answer she could possibly have given. "You have a strange look on your face. And you are talking too much for someone who is supposed to be resting." That was an elegant evasion. That was motherhood. Strong argument. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. My father came back, heard the branch story, accepted it without enthusiasm, and told me to pay more attention to where I put my feet. I don't know if he believed it. I suspect he decided that, whatever the truth was, I was still alive, so it could be dealt with gradually. I liked his investigative style much better. When night fell and the house finally quieted down, I waited. I waited for my mother to finish everything. I waited for my father to lie down. I waited for both of their breathing to become deep and even. Then I slowly sat up on the cot. The moon poured silver light through the window. My arm hurt less. My body still felt tired from the running and the tension, but in a tolerable way. In fact, there was a new firmness in me, as though simply surviving the morning had given my body a more concrete sense of itself. Good. I needed that. I slipped outside without making a sound. The village at night was a different organism. Quieter, wider, almost sacred in its peaceful poverty. I moved through shadows, low fences, and motionless trees until I reached the back of Mu Xiaoyan's house. Everything was still. I knelt by the roots, brushed aside dirt and leaves, and soon my fingers found the buried cloth. The fragment pulsed the instant I touched it, as though it recognized my return. This time, though, I was better prepared. I took the bundle with me to a small space behind our house, near a broad rock, sheltered by low bamboo and a rise in the ground. It wasn't perfect, but it was discreet enough for a first attempt. I sat on the ground, legs crossed, the fragment in front of me, still wrapped. I took a deep breath. "Instructions," I murmured. The interface appeared, gentle. Place the fragment before the host. Circulate the basic breathing technique of Serene Valley. Absorb only the most superficial flow of the resource. Objective: begin refinement, not demonstrate suicidal greed. Was that last part really necessary? Yes. I unwrapped the fragment. The bluish light immediately spread over the rock and my fingers. The chi around it seemed to respond, thin and cold, like mist brushing against skin. I closed my eyes. I began circulating my breath the way I had learned the night before, without forcing, without tearing, without trying to dominate before understanding. The flow of the world came slowly. The fragment's flow came differently, purer, more concentrated, more dangerous precisely because it seemed too beautiful. I followed the instruction, just the surface layer. Just enough to touch, not enough to sink into. The chi entered. Cold first, then warm, then something between the two, running through the initial channels of my body like clear water passing through places that had never received anything like it before. It was not pleasure. Not exactly. It was a sensation of correction. As if my body were saying, finally, yes, this. My breathing stabilized. My chest warmed. I felt the energy touch my arms, my legs, my spine, lightly refining, aligning, awakening parts of me that had previously existed only as possibility. My injured arm burned for a moment as the flow passed near it. Then the pain lessened. Good sign. I continued. No hurry. No heroics. For the first time, I understood in practice what the system meant by body refinement. It wasn't just strengthening. It was teaching the body to receive the path of cultivation, making it a more suitable place for whatever came after. The fragment pulsed. My immortal golden body responded. And this time I felt it clearly. There was something inside me, ancient, perfect, silent, that was not truly asleep, only waiting, sealed, yes, but never absent. When the fragment's chi touched that invisible core, an absurdly subtle golden wave passed through my body from within. It did not appear to the outside world, but I felt it, and that was enough. My skin prickled. My breathing nearly faltered. For 1 second, I had the absurd impression that if that seal were ever broken completely, the world would cease to be a particularly safe place for anyone who annoyed me. It was a comforting thought, also a worrying one. The system flashed. Basic body refinement initiated. I kept guiding the flow until I felt the limit arrive. Not a dramatic limit. Clean one. The kind that says stop now if you want to remain intact tomorrow. So I stopped. I opened my eyes slowly. The night seemed sharper. The air clearer. My own body more mine. The fragment was still glowing, but less than before. Not depleted. Just used for the first time. The interface appeared once more. Secondary mission completed. Reward granted. Plus 1 year of life expectancy. Reward granted. Gentle body refinement manual. My chest tightened before I even looked. But I looked. Current life expectancy. 67 years. 67. I stared at the number in silence. 67. It was ridiculous how much that still affected me. Ridiculous and inevitable. On Earth, a year had been too enormous a thing to fit into my plans. Here, I was learning to win it in pieces, through risk, patience, and the emotional discipline not to lose my mind every time I saw the number go up. 67. I let out the breath very slowly. Good, I murmured. Objective assessment. Moderately good. You are incapable of giving me one full moment of victory, aren't you? Excessive victory compromises prudence. I wanted to argue. Unfortunately, it was right in a deeply irritating way. I wrapped the fragment again with more care than before. Now it was not just a hidden treasure. It was a resource in use, promise, and also an ongoing problem. I buried it again, this time in another spot, closer to the broad rock behind my own house, somewhere even more discreet. If Xiaoyan or Wei Han decided to act on curiosity, I preferred not to depend on luck any more than necessary. When I was done, I lifted my eyes. The mountain was still there, dark, immense, carved against the night sky, serene as a deity that watches without commenting. For the first time, I looked back at it not just with ambition, but with something different, a distant sense of belonging. I was still at the very beginning, ridiculously at the beginning, but I had already taken my first real steps. Not just breathed, not just sensed, acted, survived, grown. And all of that before completing a week of my second life. Not bad at all. I went back inside with a lighter body and a more wakeful mind. Before lying down, I looked one last time at the interface as it faded. 67. I smiled. Small, tired, satisfied. Then I lay down on the cot and closed my eyes, thinking that maybe, just maybe, the real problem with my new life wasn't the danger. Maybe it was the fact that getting stronger was starting to feel far too good. Peace doesn't last long when you live in a small village. Actually, long is generous. In small villages, peace usually lasts exactly until someone looks at you for 3 seconds and concludes that you seem different, strange, too pretty, too healthy, or, in the worst-case scenario, suspiciously quiet. When I woke up the next morning, I discovered I had somehow managed all four. I opened my eyes slowly, still lying on the cot, and the first thing I noticed was my own body. Lighter, firmer, more aligned. It wasn't an explosive change. I hadn't become some tiny martial god overnight. But there was a clear difference between the body I had fallen asleep in and the one I had woken up in. My breathing felt deeper, my muscles more obedient. Even the simple sensation of lying there felt steadier, as if my body had stopped being a promising possibility and had finally begun to become a solid foundation. I liked that immediately. I also worried immediately, because everything I liked in this world came paired with some alternate version of congratulations. Now hide it better. I sat up slowly. My scratched arm hurt less. The bandage was still in place. The wound no longer seemed particularly relevant, which I considered a great show of respect from the universe toward my schedule. My mother was already awake, tending the fire. My father was still getting ready to leave. Morning light poured through the window in pale gold, and for a moment everything looked absurdly normal. Poor house. An ordinary day. The smell of simple porridge. The sound of wood. The calm breathing of people who still had no idea their son had spent the night refining his body with a spiritual resource buried in the yard. Families are beautiful precisely because they ignore so much. "You're awake," my mother said without turning around. That analysis remains technically impeccable. She finally looked at me and stopped. Ah, here it came. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, not with suspicion, with observation, as though she were comparing the boy who had gone to sleep the night before with the one now sitting on the cot. "What?" I asked, in a tone far too casual to sound innocent. "You look better." I thought about denying it, but that would have been useless. My mother had spent too many years learning to measure the smallest changes in my condition with a single glance. She was exactly the kind of person who would notice if a breath sounded half a note cleaner. So I chose the safest answer. "I slept well." She kept looking at me. My father, who was tying something near the door, also lifted his eyes in my direction. His gaze was less sharp, but more quietly precise. "You've got more color," he said. "Excellent. Full family audit." "Maybe I finally look like an actual person," I replied. My father made a low sound, almost a laugh. My mother didn't smile, but the tension in her shoulders eased a little. "I hope so," she said, turning back to the fire. "I was getting tired of seeing you look like a strong wind might carry you off." I found that offensively poetic. I accepted it. We ate in relative peace. I kept my answers short and my behavior carefully normal, which, in hindsight, may have been my first mistake. People who had been weak for a long time and then suddenly got better weren't supposed to look carefully normal. They were supposed to look happy, distracted, silly, maybe even annoying. I, on the other hand, was probably looking like a small conspirator with good posture. I need to work on that. After my father left, I washed my face, adjusted my simple village clothes, and went outside. I needed to test the body in motion before the day decided to test it first. The morning was cool. The village was fully awake now. Smoke rising from houses, people carrying buckets, chickens crossing the road with the same sense of misplaced ownership as always. The mountain loomed above everything, serene, enormous, and probably far too pleased with itself. I took a few steps, then a few more. Then I stretched discreetly behind the house, extending arms, legs, breath. Everything responded better. Not by theatrical miracle, by coherence, by integration. The refinement from last night had been exactly that. A quiet reorganization of what I already possessed. Good. Very good. The system appeared. Updated physical assessment. Initial bodily foundation stabilized. Additional comment. The host now moves with less waste and more dignity. Your concept of praise is disturbing. Efficiency is a superior form of affection. I decided not to pursue the subject for fear of discovering unnecessary metaphysical trauma behind the system's creation. I took a few quicker steps. Then I ran a little. Not much. Just enough to feel my body functioning with a joy that bordered on insulting my past life. Running. No pain in my chest. No dizziness. No fear of collapsing halfway through. The feeling was so good I had to stop before it turned me into an idiot. That was when I heard a voice behind me. I knew it. I closed my eyes for half a second. Mu Xiaoyan. I turned my head. She was standing near the fence, arms crossed, looking at me with the exact expression of someone who had come to confirm a suspicion and was annoyed to find out she was right. Knew what? I asked. That you were doing way too well. I considered the sentence. That was almost a compliment. It wasn't. Still counts. She walked a few steps closer, examining me without the slightest shame. You're different. Everyone's very observant today. That's because you're weird. This again. Not bad weird, she corrected, then seemed annoyed that she had needed to correct herself. Just different. I looked at her calmly. Mu Xiaoyan had come on purpose. That much was obvious. Maybe she had been here since early morning. Maybe she had been standing there longer than I realized, watching me run and becoming more convinced by the second that the almost sickly boy in the village had become far too functional, far too quickly. That was dangerous. But her face showed more concern than suspicion. That was less dangerous, just emotionally inconvenient. I'm getting better, I said. From one day to the next? Technically, it's been a few days. You're incredibly annoying when you answer seriously like that. And you ask structurally weak questions. She huffed. Then she looked around, made sure no one was nearby, and lowered her voice. About yesterday. There it was. The part of the day I had wanted to avoid had found me early. What about yesterday? Don't pretend. I value that option very highly. She ignored that again, which was becoming a disturbingly stable personality trait. Wei Han wanted to go back. I closed my eyes for a slightly longer second this time. Of course he did. I said no. I opened my eyes. You did. She looked offended by my surprise. I'm not an idiot. I thought about the statement, remembered several conflicting pieces of evidence. Decided diplomacy was the wiser choice. I never said you were. You said it without saying it. It's a useful social skill. She gave me a murderous look. Then, with less anger than it first seemed, continued. He thinks there might be more of those things. Those things. Beautiful technical term. Broad. Safe. I liked it. There might be, I replied. That doesn't mean 3 children should go looking for them. I know. I paused. You know. I'm not Wei Han. That was fair. I stayed quiet for a moment, studying her more carefully. Xiaoyan seemed more serious than usual. Still lively, still impulsive, still carrying that energy of confusion waiting to happen. But there was something new there too. She had been truly scared yesterday. And unlike Wei Han, she seemed to have learned something from it. I liked that in a very uncomfortably specific way. Thank you, I said. She blinked. For what? For saying no. She stared at me for a second, as if the words had landed somewhere inside her she wasn't prepared for. Then she looked away. That HM was emotionally suspicious. Shut up. Very aggressive for someone who just demonstrated responsibility. She was about to answer, but another voice interrupted first. Are you two conspiring? Wei Han appeared from the side of the path with the unfortunate energy of someone summoned by fate at exactly the worst possible moment. No, I said. Yes, Xiaoyan said at the same time. Wei Han grinned. Knew it. You knew nothing. I shot back. You just showed up with your usual statistical arrogance. He ignored the insult with the habitual maturity of someone who did not understand half the words used against him. I was looking for you, he said, coming closer. You really are better. This village is going to turn my recovery into some kind of community festival. You're faster, he commented. glancing in the direction I had run earlier. And straighter. Straighter, I repeated. Your posture. Incredible. Now even my spine is public discourse. Wei Han grinned. I told you he's weird. Mu Xiaoyan nodded with irritating satisfaction. Traitors. I deeply resent the consensus between you two. Wei Han stepped closer and lowered his voice conspiratorially. So, are we going back? No. Xiaoyan and I answered together. He looked at us. That was really fast. Because the answer is really clear, I said. Yesterday almost went badly. But it didn't. I knew that line was coming. And I hated how impulsive people always used good outcomes to defend bad decisions. Wei Han, I said, with all the patience a soul traumatized by mortality could gather, the fact that we're alive does not retroactively turn a terrible idea into a good one. He frowned as if I had said something morally offensive. That sounds like something an old man would say. That's because it's something said by a person with an interest in staying alive. Mu Xiaoyan crossed her arms. We're not going. Wei Han looked from her to me, recognized the temporary alliance, and had the dignity to look annoyed. You two are boring. Boring is excellent, I replied. Boring lives longer. The system appeared. Observation. Statement statistically defensible. Thank you, I thought. You're welcome. Wei Han kicked a stone. Then what are we doing today? The question caught me slightly off guard. Because in truth, I did have plans. I wanted to cultivate again at night. I wanted to observe my body more carefully. I wanted to think about the fragment, the manual I had received, the implications of existing in a world where my life expectancy could be negotiated like a status line. But I also couldn't isolate myself too early. If I withdrew from everything, I would attract attention. If I looked too functional, I would attract attention. If I suddenly became reclusive and profound at age 7, I would end up as local legend before I ever reached the sect. The balance between discretion and normalcy was awful to manage. Nothing deadly, I answered at last. Wei Han sighed, disappointed. Mu Xiaoyan, on the other hand, seemed satisfied. That, too, was statistically dangerous for my peace. We spent the morning near the village, doing things that, on the surface, looked exactly like the kind of ordinary activities children were supposed to do. We walked to a more open patch, helped gather some branches the wind had knocked down, and listened to adults trading rumors about the mountain, the poor harvest, and the possibility that people from the sect might come down in the next few months to look over the children from the area. That part interested me immediately. I pretended not to care, of course, but inwardly my focus sharpened. Sect. Next few months. Looking over children. It was still early, but that confirmed that my path was not just optimistic fantasy. The mountain really did look down from time to time. The problem was that if I kept improving at this pace, I was running 2 risks at once. Drawing attention too early, or trying to hide so hard that I looked even more suspicious. Cultivating in peace was proving to be a complex art. Mid-morning, while Xiaoyan was arguing with Wei Han over a crooked stick that clearly neither of them needed, I felt a faint tremor in the center of my chest. Subtle, quick, like an echo. I stopped for a moment. The mountain. This time I didn't see any glow. I didn't hear anything either. But something in the chi around me seemed to vibrate. Too faint to become a phenomenon, strong enough not to be coincidence. My heart slowed purely out of calculation. The system appeared with a single line. Resonance detected. Wonderful. Nothing threatens peace quite like vague words spoken by confident entities. Explain, I murmured very softly. Too early for a complete diagnosis. Marvelous. Useless and mysterious. Excellent combination. Xiaoyan noticed that I had stopped. What is it? I looked at her, then at Wei Han, then at the mountain in the distance, sovereign and quiet as ever. Nothing, I said. It was a lie, but not a bad one. It was the kind of lie you tell when you still don't know which truth deserves to worry you. And in that moment, I knew exactly one thing. The mountain wasn't done with me yet. There is nothing more irritating than when something mysterious happens and refuses to explain itself. The resonance in my chest had not lasted long. A light, clean tremor, as if one part of the chi around me had recognized another part inside me. It didn't hurt. It didn't glow. It didn't knock anyone out of the sky, which honestly only made me more suspicious. Subtle phenomena are always the worst. Subtle phenomena mean the problem is still getting organized. I kept looking at the mountain for a few seconds, maybe expecting another flash, a shift in the mist, an elder descending on a flying sword to announce my social ruin. Nothing happened. Naturally. Beside me, Mu Xiaoyan had already noticed that my nothing carried about as much information as an empty jar. "Shen," she called, narrowing her eyes. "You made that face again." "What face?" "That face you make when you get too quiet and look like you're thinking about something bad." I considered that. "You pay too much attention to me. You're acting too strange. This argument is getting repetitive." Wei Han came over, still holding that crooked stick as though he remained personally offended by its refusal to cooperate with his existence. "What happened?" "Nothing," I answered. "See," Xiaoyan said to him. "He's doing it again." "Doing what?" "That annoying nothing thing he does." Wei Han frowned and looked at me with the sort of concentration usually reserved for simple riddles or particularly stubborn insects. "Maybe his stomach hurts." I looked at him. "Your intellectual contribution was profound. I'm just helping. You're participating. That's different." Xiaoyan almost smiled, which irritated me because I was already getting far too good at recognizing the exact moment she tried to hide a reaction. Dangerous. Very dangerous. I ignored the mountain for the moment and started walking again with the two of them. If the resonance meant anything immediate, I would probably find out in the worst possible way eventually. There was no advantage in standing there looking like some underfed little prophet. We spent the rest of the morning filling time with activities ordinary enough not to raise suspicion. The problem with trying to be discreet is that sooner or later, you have to learn how to fake normality with conviction. I helped Wei Han carry a bundle of dry branches. I caught Xiaoyan before she slipped on a damper patch of the path. In return, I received two different kinds of irritation. His was because I bossed people around too much. Hers was because I had caught her wrist before she slipped and, for some unfathomable reason, that offended her for almost an entire minute. People really are a separate path of cultivation. When the sun had climbed a little higher, we stopped near a shaded stretch behind a few houses, where the ground sloped down toward a more open area of grass and stones. From there, you could see the mountain between the rooftops, as if it were deliberately keeping itself in view just to remind me that my peace had an expiration date. Wei Han sat on a rock and started stripping dead leaves off a branch, as if he were planning a personal war against local vegetation. Mu Xiaoyan crouched near a bush, poking at some tiny flower with aggressive curiosity. I stayed standing, looking into the distance. The system appeared again. Previous resonance still unresolved. "What a comforting update," I muttered. Suggestion: observe patterns in the body's response when exposed to the mountain's direction. That, at least, was a real instruction. I did what it suggested. Without drawing attention, I shifted my body slightly, first angled more toward the village, then to the side, then facing the mountain again. Nothing. I took a deep breath. Then I felt it. Very faint. This time it wasn't coming from my chest, but from something more internal, more profound. Almost as if the base of my body, newly refined, recognized in that direction a flow that was purer, denser, more compatible. My immortal golden body. The conclusion came as quickly as the discomfort. Great. So it wasn't some external coincidence after all. It was my own body reacting to the mountain in some way. Sect above. Pure chi above. Maybe some kind of spiritual formation. Maybe simply proximity to a greater source of energy. Maybe the universe was kindly nudging me up the stairs before I had even decided whether I wanted to climb them. "Shen?" Xiaoyan's voice pulled me back. She was looking at me again. "What?" I asked. "You made the face again. I'm starting to think my face is suffering political persecution." Wei Han looked up. "What face?" "His weird face." "It's not weird," Wei Han argued. "It's the face he makes when he's about to say something that sounds smart and annoying at the same time." I was silent. Then I nodded. That was the most accurate description you've ever given of any living phenomenon. He smiled, pleased with himself. Mu Xiaoyan rolled her eyes, but she also looked like she agreed, which I considered a minor betrayal. Then say it already, she said. I looked at the two of them. Right? I couldn't exactly say. My newly refined body with immortal potential is reacting to the mountain like a cat smelling fresh fish. That would sound bad on multiple levels. But I also didn't want to brush them off every time something strange happened. That would create distance too early. Distance draws attention. Attention creates questions. And questions, in this case, could end very badly. So I chose a half-truth. I think the mountain has places where the air is different. Wei Han blinked. Different how? Cleaner. More powerful. Xiaoyan frowned. You can feel that from here? I paused for just a little too short to seem natural and a little too long to be safe. A little. They both looked at me. Ah, there it was again. That beginning of a shift in the way they saw me. Still small. Almost nothing. But real. Not long ago, I had been the pretty, always sick boy in the village. Now I was the pretty, less sick boy who was strangely capable of saying things about the mountain with a confidence that did not fit especially well with being 7 years old and possessing no official credentials. I needed to manage that better. Wei Han reacted first. So you really are weird. That observation is losing freshness. But it could be useful, he added, ignoring my suffering. If you can feel things, maybe we… No, Xiaoyan and I said together again. Wei Han let out a sigh I considered highly disrespectful for someone still alive mainly for statistical reasons. Xiaoyan got to her feet, brushing her hands on her clothes. What he means is that you are not going to use Shun as an excuse to do anything else stupid. I would have said that more elegantly, I commented. Liar. You would have called him an idiot first. I considered that. That is also elegance, depending on the audience. She huffed. Wei Han kicked the stone on the ground. You two are very united today. The sentence hit an awkward point I was not willing to admit. Xiaoyan seemed to feel it too. Her gaze flicked over me too quickly before fixing itself on anything else. Shut up, Wei Han, she said. Interesting. I noted that mentally, which was probably already a problem in itself. The rest of the afternoon passed without major disasters, which, in the context of my new life, simply meant disaster was gathering resources for later. When the sun began to sink, Wei Han was finally called home to help and ran off with the conviction of someone who sincerely believed speed was a substitute for discipline. That left only Xiaoyan and me for a few minutes, near the path between the houses. The silence between us was not exactly uncomfortable, which made it slightly uncomfortable. She was the first to break it. You're hiding something. I did not react immediately. First, because she was right. Second, because answering too quickly would have been practically a confession. Everyone hides something, I replied. She looked at me sideways. You talk like you're 50. I prefer to think of it as premature depth. You prefer to think a lot of convenient things. That too is a talent. She stopped walking. I took one more step before noticing and stopped as well. Mu Xiaoyan was serious now. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Serious. I'm not going to tell anyone about yesterday, she said. Not about the light. Not about the beast. Not about what you took. I stayed quiet. The word she chose was a good one, what you took. Not treasure, not stone, not object. Just that. Enough to acknowledge importance without pretending she understood it. I know, I replied. No, you don't. I looked at her more carefully. The wind moved her braids a little. The late afternoon light softened her face, but her eyes were steady. I know you want to get better, she continued, and I know you don't like it when people get too involved. That was far too specific. Xiaoyan. But if it's something dangerous, she cut in more quickly, as though she were afraid she'd lose her courage if I spoke first, then you can't do everything alone. Ah, right. Worse than I had expected. Because that was not ordinary curiosity. Not impulse. Not a desire for adventure. It was concern. And concern always complicates things more than suspicion does. Suspicion you avoid. Concern you disappoint. I'm not doing everything alone, I replied, before thinking better of it. She narrowed her eyes. Who's helping you? The system appeared that exact instant. Recommended answer. No one socially acceptable. I almost admired the timing. No one, I said. Xiaoyan looked at me in silence. She clearly knew the answer was false or incomplete, but she also knew that pressing too hard would only make me retreat. She learned quickly. That was dangerous too. In the end, she let out a slow breath. You are very difficult. I see that as a form of quality. I see it as irritating. The two can coexist. She tried to resist, but one corner of her mouth almost moved. Almost. Minimal victory. Inconvenient. Just be careful, she said at last. This time I didn't answer with irony. I will. And that was true. As true as I was capable of making it. Because caution, to me, was not a nice phrase. It was philosophy. It was worship. It was the only religion that had offered me any practical chance of escaping fate so far. Xiaoyan nodded, as if accepting the answer without fully believing it, then turned and went off down the path. I remained there alone for a few moments, listening to the sounds of the village at dusk. The mountain was golden in the late light. Large, ancient, silent. The system appeared again. New observation. The resonance increases slightly during periods of transitional light. I slowly turned my face upward. Is that relevant right now? Or just offensively interesting? Both. I sighed. Apparently, even daylight itself had decided to participate in my lack of peace. I went home with my mind divided into layers. One part was thinking about Xiaoyan and the way she had spoken. Another was thinking about Wei Han and how necessary it would be to keep watch over his impulses for the next few days. But the most important part of all was thinking about the mountain. The resonance. The way my body responded to its direction. The possibility that some kind of connection was forming before I had even taken my first official step onto that path. And deep beneath all of that, there was yet another feeling. One I recognized late. Anticipation. I hated that. Anticipation is imprudence's more charming sister. And yet, when night fell over the village and I lay down on the simple cot, staring at the wooden ceiling, I had the distinct impression that something was approaching. Not an immediate threat. Not yet, but a call. Small, distant, inevitable. And for the first time since I died, I realized that one very specific, very inconvenient, and very alive part of me wanted to see just how far it would go.